You've got a copy of this. Well, what? Oh,
Okay, everyone, just to let you know that we're just waiting for all participants to kick off, to arrive, and we'll be starting in another minute or so.
Might have to turn that off.
What?
Phone. Put it in airplane mode.
All right, look, I'm going to start now. I'd just like to welcome everybody to this evening's webinar. My name's Gary Dunnett. I'm the CEO of the National Parks Association in New South Wales. And I'll begin by acknowledging that we're all meeting variously on Aboriginal lands and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I pass you all to Pat and Barry, the main attraction for tonight. And we're just having a little bit of a technical issue, which means that Sam, who runs our webinar, isn't able to actually talk to you at all. So I'm going to do the housekeeping stuff. And look, that's just to let you know that this particular Zoom meeting's run as a webinar. What that means is that you can't ask verbal questions on the way through. But sorry, I just got to, I'm hovering to enable everyone to see the chat. Yeah, you can't ask verbal questions along the way through, but what you can do is if you just hover your cursor over the bottom row of Zoom, you'll see that there's a Q&A section. And if you write any questions into there, we'll make sure that we ask them of Pat and Barry at the end of their webinar. And if you have any comments that you like to make along the way, not so much a question, but really an observation, there's also the chat function, which is also on that bottom cursor. So look, I'm going to turn now to our two presenters, Pat and Barry Derman, who are stalwarts of our MPA Macarthur branch and people who've been really focusing on the plight of koalas in New South Wales, but particularly in the southern part of Sydney, and this sort of extraordinary population of koalas we have down in the southwest, which despite being on the edge of a city, are actually one of our most significant koala populations in New South Wales as our last chlamydia-free population. So look, I'm going to pass you over to the main attraction tonight, which is Pat and Barry, and welcome them, and hope that everybody enjoys this presentation. Okay, over to you, Pat and Barry.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, we'll start the presentation. Oops.
Yeah. Good evening or morning, depending on where you're watching from. We're speaking from Wedderburn, which is where koalas were first discovered or rediscovered in 1986. And they were named the Wedderburn population because that's where they were found. But this was later changed to the Campbelltown population because they were found further north. From the finding of that small population, it sparked three actions. The first was that a very large development was fought and we won the protection of those koalas thanks to the local people and the unions all standing together and saying no. So that was fantastic. The second,
are we have I got the script? Is the slideshow up?
Yes, your slides are playing perfectly, Barry.
Oh, right.
right. The second was that our branch of the NPA proposed that the Darwell Nature Reserve and State Recreation Area be put in place, which we eventually got. And the third was that Robert Close started his 27-year study of the local koala population. So there were three good things that happened because of that. And we're going to start with the stars of our region and why we're all here. Also, we'd like to answer some questions tonight. One of those is, what is so special about the Campbelltown koalas? And why do they not have chlamydia? The answer is simple. They have been lucky, as up until now they've been able to expand in any direction they want to. They're not special. They do not have a natural immunity to chlamydia. They are just koalas, which was proven when some were taken to the south and one had ended up with chlamydia and others were killed by larger and more experienced koalas. They are just as likely to catch chlamydia as any other koala population if they become stressed or mix with infected animals.
Next one.
Yeah. In the 1960s and 70s, Campbelltown Council asked their residents, what do you want? And the answer was simple, protect our river and our scenic hills. And this is what that council did. The council brought into place the Georges River Open Space Plan that protected the river, and the hills that wrap around from the north down to Appin were zoned scenic protection, not to be developed. But now this has all changed. We have the Liberal Party plans for development and a complete change of thinking within the planning department of Campbelltown Council. Their environmental department is very good. Unfortunately, the planning are not on our side. We do have the right to comment as each new development application is released, but the government can also ignore anything we say, which they seem to be doing. Sorry about that. Now, this is our scenic hills and our river. But as you can see, they are very beautiful and really have been protected for many years. And to our south, we now have the Darwin National Park at Nature Reserve. We're not content with that, we need more, but that's a good start. And as you can see, it is pristine. It's absolutely a fantastic place to live if only they would leave it alone. What we need is a new protection for all the bushland along the Georges River so that it can link up with the Darwin National Park and to the water catchment to the south. GEC has proposed that the Two Rivers Frontier Koala Park runs across the Mount Gilead property. The reason they've done this is because it's the nearest spot to the between the two rivers. These two rivers are unique. There's nowhere else you get two major rivers so close to each other. But there's no guaranteed koala corridors anywhere along that road, along that stretch there. Not one. We've had the local planning panel has set land aside, but this is being argued that it's not fair to expect a developer to lose their lots and their money over that tiny piece of land. But that is up to Campbelltown Council if that goes ahead or not.
Here we have a lot of dots. The blue ones are males and the red ones are females. This is all the locations of which Professor Robert Close Dunn had tracked. These weren't the public sighting ones, these were just ones that they had physically tracked. And as you can see, you've got a large formation here and a large formation here. And this one here is Dan. Now he went from Kentling through to Narumba Reserve and then on the way down to Douglas Park, which was 17 k's. dots don't never really tell us nothing. So it's not until you get them so you can track them. And this is distribution in action, where you got all these koalas actually have been translocated by themselves because they disperse. This one is Bill. He went from Kentland over to here, and he got in such a little bit of a muddle there that on, I think it was a Christmas Eve or Christmas or Boxing Day, they decided to take him and put him in the Heathcote National Park. They're not all males. They're females and males, and some have got the reason that they've been located is because they got into trouble. I say into trouble, got killed on the roads. This one was Dan that I was telling you about, and he got in trouble here in Douglas Park, and he got transferred into the water catchment. So they all tell a tale. Another ally is the Country Women's Association. They've proposed the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy, which should now be the King's Commonwealth Canopy, we hope. But it's a bit like a very big organisation, and it takes years to get them to even be able to use the logo on their documents before they can do it. Using their rewilding in their document, you can see this is what they propose as corridors. So you go from there across here, and note that that is like that is because the chief scientist report says that the corridors must be adjacent to Narumba Reserve. Then Lease have always wanted to put them through. And this is Beulah and Woodhouse Creek. And there's several other corridors here, Neopian Creek, and this is the Neopian River. Here's the BioNet records. These are only a few days old. But as you can see, the number of dots that's coming, locations that's coming on the western side of the Appin Road, which runs down the centre, are now getting more and more. These dots down Appin Road are very distressing, really, because there's been lots and lots, they're mainly all dead, all been killed. And that is why we do need crossings. This is a film about done on a car video, and you can see the koala leaving the land across. Just down further, there's a tree on the right-hand side and a tree on the left-hand side where people have got killed. I'm not assuming that it could be, but I wouldn't be surprised if people are getting killed, not because they fall asleep, but because they actually swerve to miss an animal. I don't know if that is correct or not, but because unfortunately they died. The wildlife corridors that is being presented at the moment is 1.2 millimeters diameter, 1.2 meters rather, and another one which is 2.4 meters diameter. Both of these now we've heard and been on the radio as well that they're going to be at Colvett, but the actual size is still going to be the same height. They're hoping to put in a span bridge one day. This is artist's impression of a what they call them? They've got a special name. This is taken from a survey, a proposal for Woodland to Ballina. And it says there, quite easy, that one dedicated underpass or land bridge every 500 meters. That's incredible when we've been trying to get 3 along about a 5 or 7, I think it's about 7K meter length. And the underpasses have got to be a minimum height of 3 meters and a maximum length of 50 meters. We've been offered 2.4 and 57 meters. And I can't see why Appin Road crossings shouldn't be the same. In fact, I can't see why no road shouldn't be the same. And I think everybody listening to this will be the same. Here you have one from their koala monitoring program. And if you look at the last 3 entrants down here, you will see that they're only 15 meters long. And these two have both got the same coordinates. So in point of fact, you've got 3 tunnels in the same spot. And this one is only a few meters. It's got the same easting, but it's got this different northing, but not by much. All the rest are all 3x3s and 3x2, but not very many these 3. We've all heard about this, the Environment Heritage Group within the DPI. The DPI, this is their advice to the planning. That and you can see they do not support the public exhibition of the proposal, yet it went out for public exhibition. So how can that be? And then they say that everybody says, oh, they're working to the chief scientist report, but they're not. This one here says then the proposal's inconsistent. And again, last Christmas, they put it out for biocertification, yet the biocertification process should have gone to the EHG for their recommendation, but it didn't. And they also note that it's inconsistent. So they put that in twice in the same report of ICE. So you wonder really what is going on. Taken from the Tristan Lee's report, and I've got this from Professor Robert Close. We've got 3 areas, DNA up here, which is the Blue Mountains. You've got the Southern Highlands down here, and then you've got the Campbelltown area here. Only the Campbelltown area were found to be chlamydia free. Oops, sorry about that. What's going on here? home ranges taken from Robert's report were found to be likely to be 300 to 1,000. No, it's not home ranges. 300, that's the number. The actual numbers was 300 to 1,200. Based on their genetics, which the people go on about how many numbers in the range in Campbelltown. It's not just the Campbelltown, it's the genetic area, which Robert back in 2017, I think it was, predicted 1,000. The size of their home range for females vary from 10 to 52. So he put it down as an approximate area of 25 hectares. Yet up in near Coffs Harbour way, they reckon they have two per hectare. And down in Victoria, we've been told that in some of the areas there, they have 8 per hectare, which is complete. So they're not, you can't just say how many was one in one to the other area. And as for males, they range from 18 to 276 hectares, with a mean of 100. In a survey for stage 2 that the developers put out, these were the mammals and microbats that was listed, which were all threatened species. Basically, none of them are really looked at. One in particular is the squirrel glider. Apart from the koalas, the squirrel glider is still a threatened species that I believe hasn't been really looked at. It only has a home range of 3 to 4 meters. And if you look, hectares, and if you look, this is the Georges River along here, and this is the Nepean, and you can nearly see a straight line. These circles don't identify where they are, but that is roughly, in the center is where they were located. The circle represents a 3 to 4 hectare, I think it was a 5 hectare circle. So as you can see, none of these actually integrate. Therefore, one has to really say, are they different population? Are they the same population, but with the same family? And how are they going to go from there to there if they can't go across the paddock trees that are already there? None of these questions on this particular animal has been answered.
Okay. The other thing there is all the little blue dots are koalas. And then we have the Pomaderus brunea. It's a shrub. People are not that interested in shrubs, but if you're a butterfly or a bee, you do need them. And prior to the bushfires to the south, they thought there was some populations up to 100. But since the fires, they say there's only 600 plants left. And we've got over 250 on Mount Gilead, which haven't been discovered before. Now, this shrub is probably going to be the next extinction. It's a shrub, so people don't care too much. But as I say, do we need any more extensions when the government keep telling us they won't allow any more? Then we have the biggie, the Cumberland Plain Conservation Plan. The pink down the bottom is the local koala populations. Now, this map was given to us by TEC, and you can see, if you look at the side, it stretches from Woodland through Campbelltown, Liverpool, Penrith, and right up to Hawkesbury. This is a 200,000 hectare development zone, on top of all the other developments we got in this region. This only has to be signed off by Tanya Plibersek, and the developers move in. In fact, there's two developments, one down in Appin, where it's got permission to go. She can sign it off in the morning and they will take their bulldozers in the afternoon. We know there's koalas there, we know that there's threatened species there. But the walkers have suggested, well, you can catch the koalas and dump them somewhere else. I mean, that's all permitted. And as we've got all these 26 threatened species at Mount Gilead, and about the same in Appin, then one has to assume that there are threatened species all the way down that Nepean corridor, which will be completely wiped out because of this development. And this development will go all the way from the existing sprawl right out to the Blue Mountains without even bothering to look to see what's there.
They don't have to.
They are reserves, but there's not many around here. Well, there is a New South Wales Cumberland Plain Woodland Recovery Plan, but the CPCP will destroy at least 1,700 hectares of CPC. 59 hectares will be destroyed on Mount Gilead. And it'll leave that woodland that covered a 200,000 hectare area right down to 4,400 hectares. And that's going to be fragmented within reserves throughout that development plan. So we could say it's gone. Really, you can't have that. It's got to be, what's left has got to be protected. It needs to be protected now. Then we've got the reports. Well, government say we've spent billions on koalas, but what they've done is actually spend them on reports. They've got the draft National Koala Recovery Plan and the New South Wales Koala Strategy. Both identified Campbelltown koalas as priority protection. Then we had Campbelltown Koala Research and Database, 27-year study, and Birds of the Cumberland Plain, Beulah, which is next to Mount Gilead, a 21-year study. And the Chief Scientist report, he's done 3 versions, and several reports by Dr. Stephen Phillips. They all seem to have been ignored. Let's all pretend we say it's been looked at, but no, it hasn't. We've also got the Campbelltown Koala Plan and Management. That took about 20 years to get into place, and it seems to have been ignored. More recently, the Environment Heritage Group has completely slammed the development application from Lend-Lease. Then we've got the other ones. We've got the Conserving Koalas in Woodland and Campbelltown, local government areas. Woohoo, it's done by National Parks and Wildlife Service. Now, they've been our mates in the past. We've worked with them and they've been fantastic. But with this particular report, they decided, without doing any surveys for koalas or any genetic testing, that the Campbelltown koala population didn't need protection. They even stated that the east-west corridors between the two rivers are not required. Now, how can you do that? Then we're following this, which has been the benchmark report on every other report, the National Koala Recovery Plan and the Darwin National Park Plan of Management has given the koalas no protection. So we've had no protection. We've had no genetic testing. They guessed, for crying out loud. All this money has been spent on assumption. They did do surveys in Woodland. They did actually good surveys. They involved public and council. And we know from those that there are koalas in Appin. They camped on Sue Gay's house land, which she was thrown out of that property, but nonetheless. So we know that they did do good surveys, but it has made no difference. Walkers will still go ahead. I don't know. And then the other thing they have done is they put benches under the King's Falls Bridge that will make koalas from Campbelltown move down to the Southern Highlands, catch chlamydia, and then it can spread all the way through Campbelltown, the military reserve, and end up in the Royal National Park, because that's how quickly chlamydia spreads. We thought you might like to see that it's not just a local problem. They've been on the French TV, they've been in Denmark, England, and Canada, and the USA. So we've got friends all around the world that are trying to save these koalas because they're cute. They might bite, they might smell, but they're cute. And they don't deserve to be made extinct. We have to protect them everywhere, not just here, right through where they're living, from Victoria all the way up to Queensland. Now, this is what we've got, what we've been given. The Ayers Bradbury Wildlife Corridors, there's been a lot of koalas rescued there, but Landcom, owned by the government, has said there's not enough koalas to warrant us protecting them. So they move in, they first evict the families, then they clear every tree, every bush, and every blade of grass, and turn into a sea of black houses. And they've cut the corridor from Smith's Creek and between Kentland and St Helens Park, other than a small area along the river. We have Mount Gilead, stage 1. I think everybody knows about Mount Gilead. Well, this is just a tiny spot. Look at all those paddocks. They're the paddocks that are going to be covered in houses all the way to the Blue Mountains, all the way down to Wilton. It's just one sea of destruction. Now, we want a corridor by Narumba Reserve, and to do that, koalas have to get over the heritage listed canal. Now, they've been doing this for longer than the European people lived here. Well, no, since the canal has been put there. But they've been moving between the two rivers ever since. But now it's debatable whether Lend-Lease are going to use this as an excuse to not put that corridor in, because they might say they can't get the pass there, but well, they can. Appin Village, all that woodland on the left-hand side of your screen, majority of that will be cleared. So Appin Village will turn into just another part of the sprawl. That woodland is full of koalas and threatened species. Local people are seeing them all the time. Wallabies, the whole lot. You know, it's just sacrilege. Then we've got Wilton New Town. Now, practically every part of this photograph, other than the water catchment on the right-hand side will be developed. The town centre will be just here. That is at the moment a skydiving club, but now that will be a town centre. Just imagine this in the middle of koala populations and absolutely no infrastructure. Oh dear, sorry about this, folks. So here we have it, folks. This is the future for Southwest Sydney. A never-ending sprawl of moonscape. This is just, if this is democracy, then we might just as well live in a police state, quite frankly. For them to do this in an area that has got high heritage, both European and Aboriginal. Our Aboriginal drawings here, we've probably got more in this region than most other suburbs in Sydney. And they are not vandalised. I think there's about 3 that have been vandalised out of the, I think it's over 200. They are fantastic. I mean, I shouldn't talk about Aboriginal things because I know it's not permitted, but our Aboriginal heritage warrants protection, not just a little bit down in Appin where the massacre happened. The whole lot needs to be protected, not have bike tracks put past it so people can take their spray cans. So this is what we want, guys. The only way to get protection is to ensure those corridors are in place, ensure that National Park is put in all the way along the Georges River, down into the catchment and down into the Darwin National Park and over to the Nepean River. I don't think it's asking too much. They want thousands and thousands of houses without any protection for the human population or the animal population. So we need this and we need it now. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to leave you with that because hopefully you've got some questions.
Thank you to Pat and Daz for that. It's a very sobering presentation, and I suspect we all just need to take a moment to
Yeah, I'm sorry, you might want to shoot yourselves now.
to think about everything you've said. What I'm going to say on a very positive note is that NPA's never held a webinar before where we've got comments from several continents. So you've certainly cut through in a way that I'm going to say we haven't seen before, and I suspect that's as much about your personal networks and the friendships you've made as it is about this extraordinary species that you're talking about and the horrible peril that it's facing. Look, I must admit, I always happily take the privilege of being the moderator in these things to ask the first couple of questions. So I'm going to jump straight into that. And I guess there's 2 things I wanted to ask of you. One is that, as we all know, we've just gone through a change of government in New South Wales after a very long period when the coalition, the Conservative parties were in charge of New South Wales. And so we don't really know what changes the new government's likely to make. One of the ones, though, we do keep hearing sort of whispers about is a bit of a rethink on that Cumberland Plain conservation strategy. And I'm wondering if the 2 of you could sort of reflect on, well, firstly, what you thought of the quite strange approach in that strategy of giving us a pocket handkerchief of new park on the basis of a huge amount of development and really a promise over 20 years or more. You know, it wasn't as though the park was going to be created tomorrow. Whether there's a better way of actually setting lands aside as public protected areas under a revised Cumberland Plain conservation strategy. Now, as I say, there's no promises that we can achieve this under a new government, but at least there's a window of opportunity here. So I'm really keen to hear how you think government could do a better job under that strategy.
Well, I think the first thing they should have done is actually work out where the wildlife corridors were, or where they were going, or even what threatened species are there. But they've done nothing. I mean, they're still looking for wildlife corridors. I was speaking to somebody in council the other day and he said, we're looking for wildlife corridors. And I said, well, the CWA has come up with one already. And they went, oh, and chewed the cud. It's only, their only concern is development, how many houses they can get in. It's as simple as that. They don't give a darn about us, and they don't give a darn about our environment or our heritage.
Most one of the points that you brought up, Gary, was most of the Upper Georges River National Park that was proposed, most of that is already in the hands of either government or council.
Mm.
There's very little in private hands. So it's really what we think is just a stroke of the pen, and they don't particularly want to do that because running alongside of that is a proposed road that has been on the cards for years that we have been told, well, they don't really want, but they don't want to give it up. If they give this up, if they don't give this up, then basically the park won't really be functioning properly. Yeah. But because most of the koalas are living on the suburban side of it, but they say to protect the koalas, what they have to do is put a fence up alongside the road. And that is, you know as well as I do, that government doesn't like giving up any proposed road corridors.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess one of the messages I take from that is that certainly under the previous government, it was pretty clear that we were being fobbed off by the Upper Georges River Koala Park.
Yeah.
You know, and that it was a promise for a future decade, in truth. You know, it was going to take more than 20 years to put together. Maybe one of the strategies we need to go forward with is to really be insisting that the park gets resolved as quickly as possible so that we can then actually start asking the questions about what are the corridors that you need to keep that park as a useful sort of protected area. Look, the other thing I need to ask you, and look, I come from I guess the lucky situation of I'm on the other side of this population over on the Heathcote side. So I get to see, you know, what was a bit of an unexpectedly sort of healthy edge to that population. Do you think the fact that we've got the sort of the unknown lands of Holsworthy and the and some of the water catchments between Campbelltown and Heathcote is part of why government's so complacent about the fate of these koalas? I mean, is everyone just assuming that there's lots of sort of them sitting there in Holsworthy, so everything's going to be okay? Is it ignorance, or is it that the development pressures are just so intense that, you know, everything gets swept away in front of them?
I think, yeah, as you say, development is the end all be all. There are koalas in Holsworthy, in the Military Reserve and Darwell National Park. But the problem there is that the woodland isn't really what they like. Yeah. So they need such a vast area in each of those places to survive. They like the land along the Georges River and over your side, Heathcote. Yeah. That's what down Heathcote Road. They're always getting killed there as well. So the problem is you could put the fence down and keep them all over that side, and they can become overcrowded and stressed and get chlamydia like they've got everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because that is what happened. They've got to be able to disperse.
Yeah, and I guess we keep coming back to the bizarre situation that the best soils around Sydney are the ones that we're developing on. Best
Mm.
soils for growing koalas, best soils for supporting the Sydney.
Yeah.
All right, look, I'm going to jump into the vast number of questions. As usual, luckily, most of them are comments, and all the comments are very congratulatory, I must say. But there are a couple of questions. Let's start with Les. He's asking what steps the public can take to ensure that Campbelltown's koalas are protected.
Keep talking, keep writing, especially to Tanya Plibersek, because she's the lady that can knock this on the head. I mean, all she has to do is say no. It's quite simple, no.
Yep.
I think that is keep up what you're doing. It's depressing. We've been doing it for 7 years. But hey, we're still here, and there's more of us, and we've had another politician join us recently. So it's not just us public guys, it's the politicians that are coming on side as well.
Okay, and the next question's from Mignon, and I apologise because I'm sure I've got the pronunciation of your name wrong, but they're asking whether there's another location that the development could go, and I guess that's really the big issue, isn't it? You know, where else does the housing go on the Cumberland Plain or more generally in Sydney?
Well, Chris Minns has said that Sydney's got to go up. I'm sure if I lived in one of the suburbs that he wants to go up, I'd be saying, well, how are we going to cope with the public transport? So maybe the answer is that we decentralise. They did that in England, as you notice from the accent, we come from England, and they decentralised. Gatwick Airport was built in the middle of a field. There was nothing. Now it's got it surrounded by town. And they made satellite cities all over England, and they've worked. They did make sure there was public transport. This is where we fall down every time. But there's no room in Sydney. Hello, everybody. Bob Carr said Sydney was full. He was right, and that was years ago.
Yes.
One of the main things that we have been always saying is that not just koala crossings, but proper corridors must be put in place prior to development. If you don't get that right, then what else are you going to get wrong? Also, on Mount Gilead, you got stage 1 was pretty open, but at the stage 2 is very, very environmentally sensitive. In point of fact, it's got 3 main gas pipes, 1 main electricity corridor, plus about 3 other creeks that have got to have corridors. So when you actually come down to it, there's not much wood space left to actually put in building. They've worked this out, and now I reckon that they not very happy about it, because they keep on saying they change it from one thing to another, and then they say, oh, we're working to the chief scientist report. But yet, the only people who are saying that they are the people who are going to get monetary funding back, and that is council and DPI.
And the developer.
And the developer.
Yeah, there's an interesting comment here from Thor, who sort of talks about the fact that so much money's been spent on surveys, all of which have been ignored. And I guess the question we might take from that is, do you think this is actually a failure of the science, in other words, having enough information to make good decisions on, or is it simply bad public policy on the part of successive New South Wales governments?
I think it's a bit of both, because the scientific studies weren't undertaken. And so that's an assumption. Now, since when does a good scientist make a decision on an assumption? And there's no doubt about it that decisions are being made in favour of development. Campbelltown Council will make millions of dollars if they allow Mount Gilead to go ahead. Well, how can that be an unbiased decision when they're going to make all these millions of dollars that their ex-mayor has spoken about? Down in Appin, well, Appin's now just part of Campbelltown. It will be. Sorry, Appin people, but if you don't fight like mad, you're going to be stuck down there in a bushfire area full of houses and nowhere to run. And you're going to lose your koalas, just like we will lose them in Campbelltown and Wilton. They will be gone, and I doubt if it would be 250. As fast as that development goes, you can say, well, they're going to kill a koala all the time. It's not just koalas either. There's 4 separate species of macropods. Now, they can't live entirely in gullies, and neither can the wombats and all the other animals. There's a pair of wedge-tailed eagles that are bred every year for years and years and years. They're not even being considered. If they're not threatened species, they're not even mentioned. So development, that's all it's about. People, animals, heritage, Aboriginal heritage is just being ignored.
Yeah, I got to say, when you talk about common species, it brings to mind John Benson and Elizabeth Howe's book, Taken for Granted, about the vegetation of Sydney, that we take what are currently common species or being common species so much for granted, and they're slipping away. I mean, I live next to a park where, would you believe, yes, there's probably wombats left in Royal National Park, but amongst all the myriad of walkers and scientists I know, I don't know anyone who's actually seen one of the wombats. All we've seen is a few scats around the place. And, you know, what could have been more a common species in Australia than wombats? And yet here we are right next to the city, our oldest national park, and wombats are almost vanishingly scarce. So the threat's real. Look, one last question, and that comes from John, who was asking about how you see those, I guess, the koalas that are more towards the Liverpool Menai side of things. Do you see them as an important part of the population that you're really focused on?
Absolutely, absolutely. They are part of our population. If they're a koala, they are precious, no matter where they are. But we're talking about the Southwest Sydney koalas today. But it doesn't matter where they are. We're going to lose them. If we carry on with this destruction, logging, development, mines, and everything else, we will lose them.
On that, Gary, a few years ago, the federal government put out a draft koala recovery plan, and in it they said there was two populations expanding, Campbelltown and Gunnedah. Everywhere at Gunnedah was really expanding. You could see, apparently, you could see koalas everywhere. All of a sudden, now, they reckon that that particular population is one, because there's no young koalas coming along, and all the old ones have got chlamydia, that basically they're just waiting for the old ones to die out, and then it will be extinct in that area. And that is how fragile a population is. If we don't really look after them, they can die out within 5 or 10 years. And there's nothing then you can do.